Good evening and welcome. My name is Elizabeth Ascoli and I'm the Executive Director of the Brookline Education Foundation. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 2023 Margaret Metzger Fellows event. This fellowship and tonight's event represent the essence of what the Brookline Education Foundation is. We recognize that teaching is a craft and teachers are professionals, and we always look to celebrate the excellence of the Brookline teachers among us. Tonight's event is the 8th iteration of the Margaret Metzger Fellowship. The fellowship was founded by Margaret's family and her colleagues at Brookline High School in her memory to honor her over 40 years of teaching to BHS students and teaching and mentoring teachers. Originally, this was only going to exist for 5 years. However, we have come to realize that the opportunity this fellowship offers and the culminating event where we all are now is a favorite among many BEF board members, alumni, and supporters, so we decided to start it up again. We are so glad that we made that decision, and we continue to get teachers who are interested in looking inward to reflect on their experiences in the classroom, and that they are willing to share those stories with us. Because the acts of reflecting, looking inward, writing about the experiences, and reading them aloud to share are all brave, as well as an important form of professional development and learning. We also welcome members of Margaret's family tonight, as well as her former colleagues. The Metzger Fellowship and the opportunity it gives to Brookline teachers to reflect and write about their craft would not exist without their vision and generosity. From the beginning, Margaret's wife, Barbara, has been a huge supporter and very much involved, and we have been fortunate to have a number of other family members speak about Margaret at this event over the years. Tonight, we celebrate the 2023 Metzger Fellows. Tim Hintz from the Pierce School, Jeanette Sergeant from Baker School, Hannah Bjornson from Lawrence, Brendan McCarthy from BHS, Julia Mangan from BHS, and Peter Sedlak from BHS. It is now my pleasure to introduce John Andrews, Chair of the English Department at Brookline High School, Workshop Coordinator for the Fellows, and a former student and colleague of Margaret Metzger. He will also act as our Master of Ceremonies for the evening.
Thank you so much, Liz. Can you all hear me okay? Great. I'm going to repeat some things that Liz just said because they're in my remarks too. Margaret taught English at Brookline High School for over 40 years, influencing thousands of students and educators through her teaching. That's right, 40 years. Through her teaching, her writing, and mentoring, she was a 2005 recipient of the BEF's Ernest Caverly Award for excellence in teaching. She mentored hundreds of new teachers through the Brookline Mentoring Program, and she taught at the Graduate School of Brown University. I had the privilege of being mentored by her through the Brookline Mentoring Program and studying with her in graduate school. Her impact on education continues to be enormous. In honor of her life and achievements, the BEF established this fellowship fund to support a fellowship grant program for initially 3 to 5 years, and now it's grown into something that I think has great staying power. This is the 8th year of our fellowship. We took 1 year off during COVID. Through those 8 years, almost 50 teachers and educators have benefited from this process, initially from the generosity of donors, especially Margaret's wife and Margaret's family, and more recently from the support of the Brookline Education Foundation. We are incredibly appreciative of this community's support of this work. The fellowship in Margaret's honor gives teachers a chance to do 3 things that she really valued. One is to write in a process of discovery. Margaret believed, and many teachers believe, that we learn what we think through the act of writing. And so this fellowship is to give teachers a chance to figure out what they want to say through the act of writing. It's also to work in community and collaboration. A writer's job isn't to be by themselves and to write alone, but to rather write with other people and to develop ideas in community, to be shaped by each other. And then finally, Margaret believed strongly that teachers' voices needed to be out in the world, that people needed to hear what it's like in classrooms and in schools and in libraries and in guidance counseling offices as they talked about what schools should be like. And so this program, I think, does those three things very well. Gives people a chance to learn what they think through writing, work together to form a community, and then to share it with the world. The model is that the 6 educators meet for a week in the summer to write and revise, and then we share these stories in the fall. And this year, I got COVID. So day one, we had a very productive workshop, and by Monday night, I was terribly sick, and I was in bed for the next 3 days. And so COVID disrupted us in ways that we didn't plan. And yet we figured it out, as Margaret wrote in one of her essays about a start of school where kids had to run class without her on their own and sort of get things going, and they did as well or better than she would have done. We got there. We figured out how to work together, to do some Zoom calls, to meet one-on-one, to reschedule, and I think you'll see that the product is wonderful, that this group of teachers have formed a community, have thought together, and have done something pretty impressive. You're going to hear the powerful results of that work today. Okay, let's get to the stories. This is the best part. So we're going to go chronologically through schools. We're going to start with the beginning of school and what it's like to be a arriver, someone who's having their first day. We're going to hear from Tim Hintz at the Pierce School, who's a guidance counselor for grades K through 2. He's going to have us thinking about the first days of school and what memories we take from them. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Hintz.
Thank you, John. I stand before you in the very thin space that is now. The past grows with each passing moment. It lives in our memories. I have memories of watching each of my own 3 children sing, dance, and act on this very stage. Further back are the memories of my educator parents, my father, who led children in song, and my mother, who taught first grade for 27 years. I remember my teenage years when I volunteered to put up bulletin boards, to relocate bookcases, and this will surprise none of my current colleagues, to move the plants around. Looking back, I can see how hard my mom worked to make her classroom into a good place for children to learn. The post-summer jumble of piled-up furniture needed to be put into place to create an environment where she and her students could work together. It was literally setting the stage, but figuratively, it was powerful because I, as a young person, was seeing my mom in her professional role. In one of many conversations I had with her, she remarked that being a successful educator was remembering what it is like to be a child. Like many things adults say to children, it wasn't specifically meant to instruct me, but it has stayed with me and formed part of who I am as an educator. It is a memory, and in schools, memories are what we produce. There are many ways that we teach, but at the base of it all is the idea that students need to remember, and those memories will lead to better outcomes in the future. We teach routines and locations so our students don't have to figure out each time where things are or how to do them. When we teach letter patterns, math formulas, and social responses to triggering events, we're setting down memories that students can access in the future. Remembering things is the key to being able to do them more efficiently. Research shows that about half of the memories accumulated in a lifetime, that is, half of the files in the drawer, come in the first 19 years of life. There are some pretty good reasons for that, since some of the sharpest memories come from 3 different experiences. When something is new, an event that occurs along with strong emotions, and things that are repeated many times. In the years they're in public education, children do a lot of new things and have a lot of strong feelings about them, and also participate in a lot of routines. As a school counselor, I pay special attention to those times because I know the memories carried forward will help shape who the child becomes. If we remember things that are novel, then the first days in a new school are when the memory factory is particularly productive. In my job as a school counselor, the first day of school happens 30 or 40 times a year as I welcome families from all over the world to Brookline Village. What will they think? What will they remember? Well, there's a certain amount of basic information that anyone needs to know: where to line up, what to bring, and the name of the person who will bring you into the school. What is more, it's not the most important memory I'm trying to build. The goal for that day is to feel welcomed and connected. What I want them to know now and remember at the end of the experience is that people at the school care about them. Because when they know that, their brains will be ready to make memories and learn. Strong emotions are part of the daily diet for a school counselor, and I spend a lot of time saying, "You're having some really big feelings." What do I want children to remember from that experience? The first is that having those feelings is part of being a person. Sadness, frustration, and worry mean we're living in a world that doesn't always give us what we want or even what we need. The second thing is learning how to recognize those feelings and knowing that a child can learn a new way of managing them and to remember those skills and strategies for the next time. The third, and maybe most important thing to remember, is that when they felt that way, someone else was there who cared for them and helped them. When they know they're cared for, they will be able to learn and make memories. While we use the novel and unique in schools, we also spend a lot of our time building memory through repetition and practice. When my mom and my classroom colleagues bring order out of chaos by setting up their classrooms for learning, they do so to create a stable learning experience. While we can boost the chance for something to end up in a student's memory by making it novel or unique, we must remember that we don't only create memories that way. English only has one past tense, which we use to place action at any time before now. Other languages have an imperfect tense that describes ongoing, repeated, or habitual actions. I remember my Spanish teachers in high school using the graphic of a long, wavy, horizontal line to depict the imperfect and a single vertical line that crossed it to show the preterite. The view of the past and of memory is one that is also important in schools because as much as we think about the vertical lines and the information or specific memories we want to create, we must also look at the long, wavy line that is the school experience. The other thing that I have learned about memory and learning is that it doesn't stick unless there's a stable place for it to be. All that we do to make school a safe, welcoming, and accepting place for children makes their brains more fertile soil, a much easier place to draw those individual lines of knowledge. At Pierce, I build that line every day by doing things over and over. I want students to say, "I remember Mr. Hintz would walk around the school and say good morning to every class as they waited in line." Or, "When I was in kindergarten, Mr. Hintz ate his lunch with us. We all talked about what we like to eat and do." Or, "Mr. Hintz came into our class and we talked about how everyone has comfortable and uncomfortable feelings every day." We are in an ongoing battle over how and what we teach children. It is so long-standing that my mom knew about the divisions 40 years ago. Is it more important to teach specific things, either information or skills, or to create an environment where learning can happen? It is phonics versus whole language, textbooks versus novels, and preterite versus imperfect. We have to teach skills and how to do things, but in the end, what will help our students to remember? I fall in the camp of creating relationships and connections. We live in a world where novel and unique things come at children all the time via the media. My experience with children says that unless they feel safe and cared for, even new and unique things can take on a sameness that makes them recede into the corners of their minds. A steady diet of new things without the backdrop of safety and connection is the groundwork not for learning, but for discord and confusion. I want children to become people who can connect with others, who value others, and who remember being part of a community. The next generation of problems, like the generations of problems before it, is not solved just by people who know how to do things, but also by people who care about each other and can work together to do them. My mother is now 82 years old and sadly has no memory left. Her body carries on, but the things that once stuck in her brain are gone. She is in a perpetual state of piled up furniture and papered over bulletin boards. Most days, I write her a letter telling her about what happened to me or my family or at school. In that sense, I'm trying my best to mark both the specific events in my life, but also as part of a connection of that wavy line that connects us all to the past. I know that what I write and someone else reads to her will not stick in the same way, but that she knows that she is still connected to me. She also knows I still remember what she taught me so many years ago, to remember what it is like to be a child. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. It's going to be one of those nights. Get out your Kleenex. We try to be honest, and we try to take risks, and that's part of the process. So brace yourselves. It's also going to be funny. There's going to be laughter, too. Thank you, Tim. We're going to get older. We're going to move into some older elementary school experiences now. I had the pleasure of working with Jeanette Sergeant at Brookline High School for many years. She was a guidance counselor there. Yay, guidance teachers, counselors who are here. I see you in the crowd. She was district-wide Steps to Success coordinator. She's a trained facilitator for SEED, which is an amazing program that's having a huge impact on our school system. And she was an interim associate dean for a while. But now she's at the Baker School as a counselor. And we're going to hear a little bit about her process and her thoughts about growth and change. Jeanette.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. How's that? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Teacher voice. All right. You're not a great counselor yet, but in a few years you will be. Anna told me this with the usual smirk on her face and mischievous twinkle in her eyes. She had just gifted me a miniature pink pig she created in her ceramics class. Anna was one of the famous, sometimes infamous, twins that had made themselves and their strong opinions known to all BHS staff they had encountered. It was September 2006, and I was a 20-something-year-old baby guidance counselor. Anna and I had grown close over the year we had known each other since she was a junior. She had been through a lot in her lifetime, and I worked hard to earn her trust. September 2005, I was hired to fill the extremely large shoes of her previous legendary, now retired, guidance counselor. Anna had eventually started visiting my office daily. This was major progress from our initial meeting where she told me that one of the fidget toys in my office was stupid and then refused to even speak to me for weeks. Anna and I had some great conversations over the time where I learned as much from her as she hopefully learned from me. This was another one of those moments. I initially had to check my own ego to absorb what Anna said because she was right. It was a hard transition to BHS. That year inaugurated my annual cry in the school bathroom when I felt insecure or I questioned if I had done enough to support students. I needed those moments to deal with my own emotions. It would be more years of hard work before I felt like I had strong counseling skills. And even then, I still had room to grow. The definition of growth mindset is that all of our abilities are always capable of improvement through effort, and that even when we are great, we can still be greater. The definition of a fixed mindset is that all of our abilities are intrinsically stable and unchangeable over time. In her book, Mindset, Carol Dweck explains the power of yet when she writes, "And why seek out the tried and true instead of experiences that will stretch you? The growth mindset allows people to value what they're doing regardless of the outcome. Becoming is better than being." It was September 2021, 15 years after my conversation with Anna. After 4 years of being a district-wide administrator, I was returning to guidance counseling, this time at Baker School for grades 3 through 5. I was also becoming a teacher. I've never known any guidance counselors muse about wanting to teach, but now teaching was part of my new job. I was feeling like a fish out of water with this age group, and especially with teaching. It was my first week of teaching on a September Thursday. I was rushing to Baker after dropping my toddler to school. As I drove with a fixed mindset, I thought, I don't have the skills or stamina to teach in addition to all of the other parts of my job. What was I thinking making this move at this point in my career? And why did I leave my leadership position with steps to success? As I grabbed one of the last parking spots in the back of the Baker lot, I reminded myself that I really missed counseling kids, and working in Steps to Success had made me realize how critical elementary school is for lifelong learning. I also wanted to step away from the frustrating bureaucracy of being a public school leader. And simultaneously in my personal life, I had gone through a recent divorce. I was parenting 2 kids while also taking care of my elderly mother, and my doctor had recently placed me on medication for high blood pressure. Something needed to change. All of these experiences during the pandemic were draining and led me towards a great awakening, to pivot towards a new direction. I did not realize that change would involve creating a social emotional learning curriculum and teaching 1,000 hours every month. I was finding it especially hard to move out of my fixed mindset that week. In that fall 2021, while we were returning back to normal school, school felt anything but normal. There was no more hybrid and remote school, but students and staff were still wearing masks. Students and staff were still afraid of all that was still unknown. And students and staff felt anxious being around so many bodies at one time again. And kids, being the honest beings that they are for better or worse, were triggered. This played out in school in various ways. The fight, flight, freeze stress response is the body's natural physiological reaction to perceived stressful or frightening events. That stress response also contributed to many students having a fixed mindset. As I got out of my car that Thursday morning in September, I was reflecting on the first 7 45-minute classes I had taught that week. I encountered Melanie, who had gone into fight mode. After taking a long bathroom break, Melanie walked into class after I had already started teaching. She ran over to her table group, threw a container of blocks, and started screaming at the top of her lungs. The blocks seemed to fly across the room as if in slow motion. I tried to calm Melanie down to no avail and called the vice principals on my walkie-talkie for support before evacuating the students from the classroom. Evacuating a class was new to me. I'd supported a number of BHS students in fight mode, screaming in my office, upset about an interaction with a peer, with another staff member, or even in response to learning isosceles triangles. In most of these instances, supporting BHS students, I could eventually get the student to sit with me in the present through strategies to calm the nervous system. I could not calm Melanie in that moment, while simultaneously having 18 other students in my care reacting to the outburst in various ways. I was perseverating on how I felt I could have handled that moment with Melanie much better. I took a step out of my car that Thursday morning and reflected on learning about the traumatic backgrounds of many of my students that were exacerbated by the pandemic. Jonathan would often go into freeze mode. Jonathan had lost some family members during the pandemic. His teacher referred him to me because he would often have his head on the desk and be unresponsive to anyone. My initial strategies to get Jonathan to engage with me in my office and to pick his head up from the desk in class were not successful. I reflected on some BHS students who were also in freeze mode, who were apathetic about school, skipped school, and also had their heads down. I would try to get them to connect with what they liked about school to find some hook to gently reel them in while building rapport. Trying to get Jonathan's engagement in class while having to do the behavior management teaching game of whack-a-mole with many of his energetic classmates, plus remembering what I was trying to teach, had left me feeling deflated. I was still very much in a fixed mindset as I walked towards the Baker building that Thursday. The thought of teaching 5 different hot, non-air-conditioned classrooms with my mask on gave me the urge to go into flight mode and leave school immediately. I was focusing on all of my perceived mistakes of that week when I suddenly stepped on my foot sideways. I heard a crack and felt a sharp pain radiate up my leg. I thought, today may be my first day to cry in the Baker School bathroom as I limped toward the building. And then as I took each painful step, something in my mindset gradually started to shift. I took some deep breaths, like I want to do now, to slow my pounding heart and to better manage the increasingly throbbing pain in my foot. With each breath, I resolved to take this September Thursday one class at a time. I started to reflect on what had gone well that week and what I could do moving forward. It was actually nice to get in front of the 200 plus 3rd through 5th graders regularly through teaching, which resulted in many students asking to schedule times to meet with me. I was excited to discover that students at this age were so much more receptive to social emotional regulation strategies. I decided I would plan to sit in on classes to observe the skilled teachers, and I decided to give myself grace because even veteran teachers were having challenges with classroom management that year. As I reached my office door, I took in the laughter of students entering the building. Elementary students have a contagious sense of joy and wonder about the world that had sparked my reconnection with my own inner child. I decided I would keep limping forward. I was proud of myself for making it through that week, that entire Thursday, limping on what I later found out was a fractured metatarsal bone. It was spring 2023, and Kelly was fidgeting with the miniature pink pig in my office. Kelly and I got to know each other very well the prior year. It was an overwhelming time for her, unconsciously triggering past family trauma, which showed up in how she argued with peers, fight mode, how she didn't want to attend school, freeze mode, and how she even tried to run out of the school building on one occasion, flight mode. Kelly was consistently in a fixed mindset, and we met often. It was heartbreaking how miserable Kelly was my first year at Baker, and I was so happy to witness Kelly progress into a more grounded embodiment of herself. She was moving towards having a more consistent growth mindset. During our conversation, Kelly was saying that the calming strategies I taught her had helped. Then she tilted her head to say, you know, you have more energy here in your office versus when you're teaching in my class. This precocious student was commenting on my teaching skills, and she was right. But this time, I didn't need a moment to check my ego. I knew I wasn't there yet, but I know I can get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. It's great. Staying in elementary school or heading towards middle school, we're going to hear from a second in Hannah Bjornson. Hannah's been teaching in Brookline for 4 years, initially as a special educator and now in an English classroom. An important part of this fellowship has always been to have a wide range of voices and a wide range of experiences. We've made sure that we've had teachers from every school in Brookline, but also we want to have teachers and educators at the beginning of the career, as well as some of us who are closer to the end. Hannah, it's all you.
All I could think of on the first day of school in the fall of 2022 was, wow, this is uncomfortable and I'm so awkward, kind of like now. The 20 pairs of eyes staring at me as I stumbled through my introduction to the class didn't help. And then they started asking questions. Is this assignment practice or performance? Someone asked. I'm not sure. That's a great question. I'll get back to you, I stammered. What's the next unit going to be after the launch unit? Another great question. I haven't thought that far ahead. I was hired 2 days before the start of the school year, and I was feeling incredibly overwhelmed. I had never taught 7th and 8th grade English before. I had been teaching special education, and I had gotten very comfortable planning small group lessons for individual goals. Sticky note to-do lists were piled everywhere. On my laptop, on the desk, on the board. The room wasn't set up, my schedule wasn't created, and most worrisome to me was that I had no lessons planned. So as a result, most of the sticky notes were all about curriculum. I was so insecure about the curriculum and felt that that was my top priority. Surely, as a general education teacher, my subject expertise and ability to teach reading, writing, and critical thinking must be the most important aspect of my job. And I must put all my time and energy into mastering curriculum and lesson planning, I thought. And grading. Does my lesson plan have explicit instruction and time for practice? Are my assignments clear? Do my rubrics make sense? Did kids achieve the lesson learning goals? Those were the questions that I asked myself every day. Sorry, I just lost my place. Despite the self-doubt, the year was okay, even better than I had expected. Perhaps the more important question I should ask myself about the last year is, why did it work at all? Why was there some success? I have several theories, but here are a few that seem most probable. The first theory is that I was around all the time. Not just on my scheduled office hour day, but nearly every day after school. This wasn't because I was anticipating students dropping by. I know that they were busy. I knew they had social lives and extracurriculars to attend to. Staying every day after school was out of necessity for myself. As a first-time English teacher, I had too much work that needed to be completed and not enough time to complete it in. Meredith started staying after school to do their homework before they had to go to piano lessons. Then Logan joined. Melissa started staying after school to make prioritized to-do lists with me in an effort to complete work on time. Abby, Emily, and Laura offered to clean and organize my classroom occasionally, which turned into them playing Taylor Swift and Abby practicing pliés and pirouettes. Then I had students wanting to meet about their writing, but they would bring friends. And once we were done with the writing conferences, there was always chatter about their lives or school or staying up too late binge-watching TV shows. Wendy dropped by with Anna and talked about how the dynamics among the 8th grade girls were complicated and weird, and how friend groups changed drastically since 6th grade. Brianna started coming by toward the end of the year, giving me homemade treats, and eventually staying to decorate my windows with beautiful, colorful drawings that remain today. I didn't mind that my quiet, solitary work afternoons became filled with teen chatter and energy a few days a week. The second theory of why the year was somewhat successful is that I tended to share honest answers to many questions kids asked, and I was very transparent with them about assignments, deadlines, and grading. I was also pretty transparent about my emotions. This honesty and transparency unintentionally helped me build rapport with students. One morning, I was sitting at my desk, and Pam came to class a minute or two early. They looked at me to say hi and said, what did you do to your face? I knew they were referring to my very red upper lip. I replied, I got my lip waxed yesterday and have very sensitive skin, so that's why it's still red. They looked at me with a puzzled expression and said, why did you do that? I said, I don't know. Perhaps in that moment, that level of honesty wasn't the way to go. And as the year progressed, I did learn to set better boundaries with my students. I blushed frequently. Whoops, where am I? Oh, shoot, I should have printed this larger. Okay. I blush frequently, and especially when I am angry or embarrassed. One day during that school year, I blushed in front of my students because I was embarrassed that I had sweat stains that were becoming larger and larger the longer I stood in front of the kids to teach. One student, Joe, called out, Miss B, your face is unusually red today. Eloise piped up, Joe, that's not something you should say to people, especially your teacher. There were nervous giggles around the room, and I finally responded with, yes, it is red, Joe. It's hard to find the balance between being yourself and sharing things about your life and then being the teacher and setting high expectations in a structured environment. I think you can do both, but I think both take time. The third theory of why the year was somewhat successful is that I was learning alongside the kids, so we both had to practice lots of flexibility. One student, George, was particularly frustrated with me during a project at the end of our dystopian unit. In true fashion, I had been transparent with the students and told them that I had never done this project before and that they were in the unique position of being able to do it for the first time and give me honest but constructive feedback. George marched up to me at the end of class and said, "You know, Miss Bjornson, you really need to be more clear about deadlines and get better at telling us exactly when things are due." I looked at George and said, "You're absolutely right. I do need to get better at identifying exact deadlines. It's hard to know how much time you will need to complete things when I've never assigned this project before." I was very upfront about my uncertainties, and I think this helped kids understand that I needed flexibility from them on their behalf, on my behalf, and that I would also practice flexibility on their behalf. I also tended to be a champion at accepting late work, which went hand in hand with the challenge of establishing deadlines. In an effort to be more strict and help kids practice meeting deadlines, I decided that if kids missed their book talk, they would only be able to receive up to half credit. Between the tears, frantic attempts to finish at the start of class, and me being too empathetic, this policy fell apart immediately. It specifically fell apart in 7th grade. I would announce the book talks of the day at the beginning of each class. One day it was Rachel's turn. "All right, we have Rachel's book talk today." Rachel looked up, red in the face, tears welling in her eyes, and said, "I don't have it." After class, I told Rachel to present the book talk after school the following day. Similarly, Erica was supposed to do her book talk, and she knew it wasn't done. For the first 20 minutes of class, she was upset in the hallway and the bathroom. I spoke with her and said to sign up for a new date on the calendar. Jenny missed multiple book talk deadlines. Instead of taking points off, we made interim deadlines, and she was required to come check in with me after school to show me she had completed the task we assigned. Sometimes I thought to myself, "You're being such a pushover and not helping kids learn how to meet deadlines by being so flexible and accepting late work." But then other times I thought to myself, "It's devastating to see kids cry in front of me and or their peers, and I think we have a mutual understanding that we both need the space to mess up and figure things out, which I truly believe is at the core of the middle school experience." What I realized is that despite being so uncomfortable with the curriculum and insecure about my abilities to deliver the instruction, kids learned. And now that I have had a chance to reflect on this year, I'm realizing that they learned because they felt safe. They learned because they felt connected. They learned because we had mutual respect for each other. Whatever my inadequacies were that year, my adequacies made up for it. I gave the 8th graders an end-of-year survey that asked the same questions about each unit. I was genuinely curious about the student experience taking the course and wanted to know what they would change or keep. I did bribe them with extra points if they completed it. However, even with the bribe, I got such thoughtful answers and answers that helped me understand why this school year was successful. One student, Nick, left a particularly kind and honest response. "Even though I left a decent amount of criticism, I think you were a fantastic teacher. Not only did you almost single-handedly teach me how to take notes and do notebook pages, but you also helped me write better essays and memoirs. Not to mention you lent me some of the best books I have ever read. And you were a cool person while being a great teacher. Thank you." Wendy wrote, "Thank you for being my teacher. It was so fun having you, and I'll definitely miss you in high school. You're really chill most of the time, and you seem like a teacher I can be more open with. I don't want to give you the wrong idea. There was definitely warranted constructive feedback in addition to the compliments. I was not surprised in the least by my buddy George's comment, 'You can be more strict on the deadline.' Succinct and true." Ibrahim said, "This course was very fun overall. It just needs to be polished a bit more, which I'm sure will happen naturally with experience." Very true. I made a lot of mistakes in the 2022-2023 school year. I have many notes on what I will do differently for certain units going forward. I have no notes for myself about making connections with students. I think the answer to my question of why did this year work is simple. I connected with kids in an authentic way, and that got me much further than I realized it would.
Good work. Nice job, Hannah. Two things I wanted to say before we move on. We're heading to high school. The next year are going to be from high school. One, Margaret had a great belief in the importance of doubt and the importance of self-doubt and challenging oneself and questioning oneself, and I think you're going to hear that through this evening. The second thing I want to say is that names have been changed to protect the innocent and the wicked. So any student name or identifying factors, we've changed the names and we've changed descriptive parts of them, so you shouldn't be able to know exactly who they are as we go through this. So I saw some high school people nodding around some of those stories that Jeanette told. I know who those kids were. Okay, we're moving to high school. Brendan McCarthy has been working at in Brookline schools since 2012 in various roles, starting at Lincoln and FRR, at Brookline High School since 2014 as a transition counselor. He's going to ask us to think about what students are doing after the public schools of Brookline, and how are we helping all of them to prepare for that.
That was a nice short walk from my seat. Can everyone hear me okay? So last June, 85% of BHS grads who threw their caps in the air went off to a 4-year college. What happened to the others? The kids whose minds weren't designed for 4 walls and state testing, or those who couldn't afford the ever-rising costs of college tuition. They tell a different story than their peers. As a transition counselor at BHS, my job is to help these young people choose meaningful plans for after high school. But it often feels like an uphill battle in a system designed to send students to college. Stephen marched into my office and beelined for my desk. Stephen had moved to Brookline in 5th grade and learned to speak English over the next couple of years, during which time he was diagnosed with learning disability. As a junior, Stephen knew he wanted to go to a vocational school after high school, but wanted exposure to different trades before he graduated. His persistence sometimes rattled me, like when he ordered me to write something down, or when he put his hands over his face upon discovering a certain trade school had a high tuition. This time, the issue was the fact that pre-apprenticeship programs couldn't start until after he had his diploma. So you mean I can't do any of these programs while I'm still a student? No, but this is just the nature of the trades. People can't risk the liability of hiring someone under 18. We just don't have anything like it at the high school, so we have to do a lot of digging. Both of our tones were frustrated, which was unusual for me. Maybe it was because this was the 3rd or 4th time having this conversation. Stephen had every right to be exacerbated by this whole process. Why was it this hard to get trades experience for a 17-year-old? Stephen grinned at me while I chatted with a prospective employer on my office phone, amused by my schlocky salesman pitching. I smirked back at him, self-aware. The tension from a moment ago dissolved as I wrapped up the conversation and secured a part-time gig working with a local construction company. Stephen raised both hands in celebration. Mr. M, thank you. Now can you please call your coworker's husband? I had mentioned another day I might be able to set him up to shadow an electrician, the husband of another BHS teacher. I gave him a fist bump, picked up the phone. You got it. Claire and I had just fired off an application to a grocery store. Not a long-term plan by any means, but a way to make some money before she graduated. I turned away for a second to take a sip from my Nalgene water bottle. So, if you haven't heard back in a week or so, I'd definitely follow up with a phone call. I swiveled my chair. Claire was on her phone. Hi, this is Claire, and I wanted to make sure you got my application. Yes, that works. Thank you and see you then. Claire looked up at me, matter-of-factly. I have an interview next Tuesday. She ended up nailing the interview and landing the job. A few weeks after she started working, Claire missed school several days in a row. Her teacher and I realized her manager was scheduling her during the school day. You can't make this up. When we explained to Claire this is not only illegal, but also terrible for her academics, she shrugged, but agreed it was important to go to school. Long term, Claire was interested in becoming a radiology technician. Together with her guidance counselor, we looked at college programs with serious concerns about the viability of college, given her shaky academic history. Ultimately, Claire enrolled at Mass Bay, sticking with her radiology plan. I recently heard she is still cracking away at her classes while balancing night shifts as a hospital custodian. One of a kind didn't begin to describe Louis. A gangly frame held upright by a pair of Doc Martens. You might picture a budding punk rocker. Instead, you've got a star hockey left winger who routinely lit up scoreboards. Louis' learning disability made academics incredibly difficult for him. Socially, his authentic nature had won him more than a few friends and teachers who absolutely adored him. Louis dutifully attended his classes and avoided doing any real academics with the same dedication. When I started working with him, his teacher advised me to avoid discussing future plans. For a career counselor, this was like asking a football coach not to discuss touchdowns. In his mind, she explained, he had no prospects for after high school, and probing about future plans would distress him to the point of shutting me out. So she impressed on me how a trusting relationship was the key to working with Louis. So we decided for an entire year, twice a week, I would drop by his learning center and say hi. After a year of building rapport, we would then attempt planning his future when he was a senior. So I accepted the assignment, and that winter, I dropped in twice a week, plunked myself in the seat next to him, and spent 20 minutes each session discussing a wide range of topics: the BHS hockey team and the Bruins. My favorite moments were when he showed me game highlights on his phone. His eyes would light up as he showed me a reel of himself racing down the ice on a breakaway or firing a laser right into the net. So this sort of kind of worked, and then it was spring. With the BHS hockey season well over and the Bruins out of the playoffs, we were running out of things to talk about. So one afternoon, I pulled out a career interest inventory for kicks. After 10 questions, Louis answered every single one with dislike. About 10 questions too late, I shelved the inventory and told him, don't worry about it. His teacher overheard the whole thing and begged me, never do that activity again. She didn't call me a moron explicitly, but it was heavily implied. Louis' senior year, counseling with me was added to his schedule, and I prayed he would come to my office. Well, never for our meetings. He had come to my office to visit a friend, and at one point had scored a granola bar out of my desk. Hi, Brennan, can I have a granola bar? Was the first thing Louis said when he came in for our scheduled time together. I was ecstatic and ready to buy the kid a lifetime supply of Nature Valleys if it yielded more meetings together. With help from his parents, Louis had shifted his thinking and was considering going to college to play hockey. Thinking professional hockey was his only career outlook, Louis made up his mind that he must go to a D1 school. While we all celebrated his new mindset, we worried about his chances of getting into a competitive college, let alone making a D1 team or maintaining good grades. Despite his athleticism, he was a big fish, a small pond, and never completed a homework assignment by himself. I think we have to keep planting seeds, his dad had said during a team meeting. Louis is the kind of kid who will say no to something 4 times, and on the 5th time, might actually say yes. So I planted seeds, bringing up junior colleges, prep schools, community colleges. Hell no. No. Nope. And on the 5th or 6th time, maybe. I'm not going to Vermont, bro, Louis told me when I broached the idea of a college prep program called Gregerson Academy. 5 weeks and about a dozen granola bars later, Louis and I completed an application to Gregerson. It didn't hurt when he looked at their website and learned that at least one alum had played for the Bruins. The acceptance letter hit us all with a blast of profound relief. After countless tears and team huddles, Louis had a plan for after high school. While his teacher and I white-knuckled our chairs, thinking about his academic prospects for after this prep year, we found solace after Zooming with a Gregerson support counselor who assured us Louis' academic skills were on par with many of his classmates. Maybe, just maybe, after 5 or 6 attempts, a staff at Gregerson will convince Louis he has skills beyond hockey. I can't help but think of what skills would have been unlocked had Louis been exposed to a non-academic path when he was younger. These are just 3 of the countless students who have come to my office in the past 10 years, looking to explore a world beyond college. The concern that creeps in my mind when I'm driving home from work or doing the dishes at night is, am I doing enough? As someone who did have the luxury to go to college and meander through majors, sometimes I question, how am I doing in this role? And if I'm doing enough to disrupt the system at BHS, which is designed for students who can play this academic game and have the financial means for college. Students who are at a disadvantage, academically or economically, are tasked to be more self-determined, more resilient, and to an unfair degree. It's time we take that onus off of them, make it easier, not harder, to identify and pursue careers outside the college box. Luckily, I'm not the only one at BHS working for change, as these conversations are happening. Change is coming. It's on the horizon, but still it's an upstream journey as we set course to this world where students can commit to vocational programs with the same confidence and motivation as their college-bound peers.
Thank you, Brendan. Two more things I was thinking. One is how this community begins to shape each other in their writing, and I'm hoping you start to hear the echoes and content bouncing back and forth between them. They take risks, and that challenges their peers to take risks. It's a beautiful thing to watch as someone says, I have to throw out that draft and start over because so-and-so wrote that. It's amazing to watch the community help each other grow. And then I was thinking about this quote that Margaret included in her Caverly speech in 2005. In education, I do not find answers, but I find questions worthy of a lifetime of thought. And I think we're hearing some of those thoughts today. We're going to hear some more from Julia Mangan, who has been a science teacher in physics and chemistry at Brookline High School since 2015. When we need someone to do hard work on a committee or a school project, people turn to Julia Mangan. It's great to hear from you today, Julia.
Imagine this. It's fall at a busy orchard in a small central Massachusetts town. Families with small children are going on hay rides, petting farm animals. Bakers are scouting out the most eclectic apple variety for you pick. The smell of cinnamon and apple cider and donuts is in the air. And 24 Brookline teenagers wearing flannel, Doc Martens, and colored hair get off a bus. These giddy teens start skipping, jumping for joy. They're not here to cause trouble. They are here to pick. Like children again, they become obsessed with a llama. They eat more apples than they can make it into their bags, and they lay in the grass, staring up at the clouds. At school and at home, things feel more difficult. Smiles don't come as easily for these students who don't usually fit in. But today, together, these queer students from the Brookline High Gender and Sexuality Alliance are unburdened. This is what true queer joy looks like. Shedding the weight and the baggage of being one's true self within a society that can't seem to understand. It's happiness against overwhelming odds, and it's a community that creates belonging around uniqueness as well as similarity. And as a teacher and a GSA advisor, I live to create these moments for my students. After all, I never felt true queer joy myself until the age of 37. Growing up in a religious, white, middle-class family, there were certain expectations of me: college, career, family, home. Sure, I'd have choices like where to go to college, or which well-paying career I'd choose, or which man I'd fall in love with, how many kids to have, but the path was laid out. I resented it. I dreamed of tattoos and piercings and purple hair and living a real life, not the sterile one that was expected of me. Sure, I was also a nerd. I loved science and math and reading and learning, and so the college part actually seemed pretty great. And sure, from third grade, I can remember wanting of all careers to be a teacher. Nothing punk rock about that. But the family part, something just never sat right with me. In high school, I fell in love with my best friend, Megan. She was an artist, an actual punk rocker, and came from a family that didn't try to pretend everything was perfect. In finding each other, we found ourselves. And looking back at my YA bookshelf alone, I probably should have known I was queer long before meeting her, but I never admitted it to myself until meeting Megan at the age of 16. We had 3 glorious weeks in a beautifully secret relationship before I got scared. A few friends found out, and before even waiting to see if they'd accept me, I shut it down. I shut myself down. I decided I wasn't going to be queer. It's terrifying. Looking back, I'm tempted to let myself off the hook. After all, gay marriage was still illegal. Matthew Shepard had just been brutally murdered. And I didn't know a single out teen or adult in Massachusetts. But today I realize it was just fear, like raw, ugly fear. And not even of what they would do, but of just who I was. So I buried my queerness down deep. I wouldn't even let myself be curious. I was so scared to know my true self, let alone be my true self. 5 years later, in a changing political and social landscape, my sister came out. And watching my parents' abysmal response to her, I committed to playing a role of straight daughter. I thought this role would give me leverage to help move my parents toward who my sister needed them to be. But in putting on this hat, I began to live a life for someone else instead of for myself. I repeatedly denied myself relationships with women and stuck it out in relationships with men that were abusive. To me, bisexuality has always felt like an internal struggle, this constant push and pull between queerness and straightness. When dating men, I'm perceived to be straight and treated as such. When dating women, the exact opposite. There's an assumption that who you're dating defines who you are. And many queer people lean into this supposition just as much as many straight folks. I've had queer friends say, hey, bisexuality doesn't exist. That's just what straight people tell themselves when they're experimenting. Similarly, straight friends have said, you're going to eventually have to choose a side. And for years, I internalized this rhetoric. I believed that the more heterosexual my relationship, the less queer I am. And over time, I just lost sight of my queerness entirely. So at the age of 32, I had somehow found myself down a road my parents laid out for me. Great teaching career, loving husband. And I wasn't happy. There was something missing, something deep. And as the world moved on and my sister and her wife had 2 amazing kids, I increasingly began to realize I wasn't staying in the closet for her anymore. It was about me. Sounds insane. Today, the world is so much, as a much easier place to be queer than ever before. In Brookline, Massachusetts, doesn't get much easier than that. But every time I wanted to come out, I'd decide I was exactly what those people said I was, not queer enough. And perhaps serendipitously, this was the moment when Kate Leslie asked me to help out with the GSA. Though I still felt like a little bit of an imposter, was I really queer enough to be an advisor of students? How could I help kids who know themselves enough in high school if I'm still only out-ish? But I accepted because I missed the feeling of being in queer spaces, and who could have predicted that it would be these incredible kids who would help me on my journey to fully embrace myself? Working with the GSA is wonderful, and it's so much more than a student hangout space. Somehow this club must simultaneously be an empowering space for student activism, learning about queer history, a support group for processing grief and hate, as well as a fun community that carves pumpkins and, yes, tie-dyes t-shirts. Honestly, I had forgotten what queer true joy looked like. Those first few years with the GSA were more than fun. They were healing. In teacher school, they teach you how to plan lessons and make worksheets and help students learn. But what they don't teach you is that the job is about so much more than being good at explaining your subject. I mean, much to my dismay, students who come back to visit, they never want to reflect on how well they learned Newton's second law. Or how much they love that roller coaster lab that I spent 8 hours working on. Instead, they think back to how they felt. Remember how funny it was when Danny's egg bungee jump exploded all over the floor? Or your passion for physics made me love it too. And when I chose teaching, I couldn't possibly know that in pursuit of the students learning a subject, you actually have to bring your whole self into the classroom. Being vulnerable and upbeat and taking risks and being curious encourages them to do the same. And sharing of yourself helps students share of themselves. Learning works best when it's truly reciprocal. But what if the self you're bringing into the classroom is riddled with self-hate? I was finally forced to confront the baggage I carried when Naomi, a GSA student, offhandedly stated during a conversation, man, sometimes I worry that if I end up with a guy, I won't be queer anymore. And there it was. like the same internalized messaging I had held my whole life. And hearing this out loud with such clarity and honesty was hard. It was heartbreaking. I mean, don't we all want to create a better world for our kids than the one we created for ourselves? Now, my knee-jerk, teacher, empathetic reaction was probably to stammer through something like, no, you are you, no matter who you love. What a fraud. After all, if I really believed this, why would I have spent so much of my life feeling pulled between two identities? Why was there such a disconnect between my internal dialogue and my automatic response to Naomi? But this one moment with a student seemingly unveiled a simple truth I couldn't get to on my own. Who you're with is not who you are. And with this realization, memories started rushing back to me. There were a million ways I felt queer long before I ever felt attracted to others. When I was 8 years old and became obsessed with those two male penguins at the aquarium raising an egg together. Or when I was 12 at Girl Scout camp and became swept up with the romance that here, in this one place on earth, it was okay for my female counselors to date each other. Queerness had been a part of my existence before I knew queerness existed. And the rest of it, the idea that I'll have to choose a side, that being bi is a constant struggle between straight self, queer self, that's all bullshit. And while I internalized it all for decades, one seemingly small moment in which a student's fears mirrored my own helped to shatter the delusion. There's a weirdly toxic, but somehow compelling narrative in politics right now that suggests that books and educators are somehow teaching kids to be queer. But for me, it's been the exact opposite. Through listening to my queer students and trying to help them understand this world and become their best selves, I have become a better self. And these students unknowingly helped me to begin to peel away the layers of filth and self-hatred that I internalized through a lifetime. So this past year, I wanted to do something different. I came out to all of my students, physics and GSA alike, and with a little less self-doubt. I mean, actually, it was just a brief mention during the intros at the beginning of the school year. And yet, more physics students than ever stopped by for non-physics help. For example, my seniors asked me for help working on their college essays, many of whom talking about their experiences being a woman or a queer person in STEM. And a queer but non-GSA student, they kept coming to hang out after class to discuss this year's slew of anti-trans legislation and their fears of leaving the Brookline bubble. And I was touched even when a physics student told his story at BHS's Day of Dialogue, stating, "I don't think I would have done this if you weren't my teacher this year." These queer students may never have needed the GSA, but I never realized how much they did need a queer science teacher. And for the first time, I'm confident enough in myself to be that for them. While being a teacher has always been the most important part of my identity, I've never felt more settled both in myself and more resolved to be this person for the sake of students like me. And so at the age of 37, perhaps for the first time ever, I felt true, unencumbered queer joy. Thank goodness I took a lesson from my students.
Thank you, Julia. I needed to hear that a few years ago. That's great. I have a long list of things I could say about Peter Sedlak. Many of them are kind. He's been at Brookline High School since 2004. He's going to help run the college essay workshop tomorrow with Rob Primer, which is an incredible event where seniors from Brookline get help writing their college essays. Thank you for that. The list goes on. Mostly I want to say that he's a friend. He's someone I respect in the English department, and he's someone I turn to for good advice and for anything. Anyway, Peter, come share your story.
My first tears in the classroom came unexpectedly. At the end of my first year of teaching, I was trying to find a way to say goodbye to a group of struggling and wayward seniors. They were, let's be honest, not great students. AJ, who could barely read and was a nephew of an infamous South Boston mobster, would only talk about weightlifting and getting ripped. Fallon was caught in flagrante delicto in the boys' bathroom on the first day of school. Elon was dealing drugs. Tommy was apathetic about everything. That April, I was so worried about them that I helped them fill out job applications. And when I looked them over, their names were misspelled, and their handwriting was like the scrawl of a 5-year-old. They were going to graduate, but just barely. To say I was worried about them is an understatement. And as the final seconds of that last class ticked on, I scrambled for something to say. I muttered something about how the world after high school was different and harder, less forgiving. My heart rate quickened, and then my voice got wobbly. And suddenly I could feel the tears sloshing in me like water in a too-full glass. Chris O'Brien then said, "Mr. Sedlak, are you crying?" I wasn't sure I should admit it, but I said, "I think I am, Chris." "Why?" he asked. I don't remember if I even responded because the bell chimed and off they went. At the time, I opined that I cried because I was concerned for these young people, that after high school they would never have a chance to learn in such a safe setting again. A little more time and they would be more prepared. But really, that's a condescending lie to make me seem heroic. In reality, I think I cried because I felt I knew I had failed them. All those lessons in November on literary devices or Hemingway's style didn't connect with them. And I feel they needed a teacher who worked with them and not one who stood in the front and conveyed information listed out in the state frameworks. At the time, I didn't know how to make it relevant to them. And in that moment, I felt the responsibility of being a teacher, that what I do or say does have an effect on others. And I can accept now that I was not a good teacher, and it still hurts to realize this. When I decided to pursue an education degree, I thought, I have an English degree. It's a logical next step to teach. I'll read books, talk about them, share stories with kids, create moments in learning like I experienced. Those first years of teaching focused a lot on the intellectual. I was eager for discussions about characters and motifs and symbolism. If someone brought up existentialism, I could feel my toes bounce in my shoes. So it was a surprise to realize how much I had to confront being overcome with emotions in the classroom. It wasn't something I even anticipated about this profession. And even today, these emotions can sneak up on me like some merry prankster unstitching the refinement of my shirt and tie. Since that first year, I've cried, not very often, but many times in class. I cry after getting a sweet thank you letter. This year it was Lisa's card saying she was grateful I understood her mix of depression, perfectionism, and writer's block. I cry reading essays too, like when Graham wrote about his father's drug and gambling problem, which led to his struggles in school. It was like a primal howl, and I was overwhelmed that he shared it with me. And I had to compose myself from the bathroom after Nate Meyer left me a 2-page poison pen letter that said I made him hate school, that I was, quote, single-handedly the worst teacher in the high school, end quote. He was polite and a quiet student, and I was stunned to realize how my class marked him in such a negative and profound way. I had to sit on the toilet that day and wipe back some watery eyes and accept that he might have a point. I have tears when giving positive feedback on an essay, filled with pride and awe, and when giving some not-so-positive feedback. I surprised myself 2 years ago while confronting Michaela over the plagiarized introduction on her Things Fall Apart essay. I knew that failing this assignment would mean failing for the quarter and that her parents would be beyond upset. And there was no doubt about my disappointment, but as her eyes glistened, so did mine. Because it hurts filling in zeros in a grade book and to fail someone. Sometimes I'm reading something aloud, like the end of The Things They Carried, where a young Tim O'Brien, in grief, dreams about his dead girlfriend, Linda, who had brain cancer. Maybe the third time I was teaching this book, while we were discussing the last chapter, I just broke down. We got to the part where Tim asks Linda what it's like to be dead, and she says, I don't know. I guess it's like being inside a book that nobody's reading. An old one. It's up on a library shelf, so you're safe and everything, but the book hasn't been checked out for a long, long time. And all you can do is wait. Just hope somebody will pick it up and start reading. Somewhere in there, the words must have gotten blurry, for I could barely speak them through the short breaths of my crying. Perhaps it was simply the power of a good story, or that we want to be remembered, or that we all want to have mattered enough to be remembered. As I took a breath before moving on, Caleb, who was usually uninterested in the class, said with much glee, "Dude, he is really crying." And I'm sure it was an unexpected sight to look up and see their 6'2" teacher in a blue suit trying to hide his watery red-rimmed eyes. In many moments, those tears were brought on by disappointment or an unpleasant realization, or doubt, or shame, or empathy, feeling rejected or regret. Those feelings just seemed to float to the surface like secrets in a quiet room. And I wasn't always ready for the reveal, and it took many years before I started to accept this as part of the teaching world. And sometimes I know I'm carrying feelings within that drop right in the middle of class. The Monday after my colleague, office mate, and dear friend Amy died began and ended in torrents of tears. I was the first to arrive in our office that morning. She had not been teaching, but her presence was still afloat in the room. I inhaled hard, and as I glanced at her desk, still piled with books, papers, and folders, and when my colleague Rebecca walked in and mascara muddied on her cheeks, I turned to hug her to hang on to something I knew was sturdy. The bustle of the school day meant I had to compose myself for class, and I was really hoping that the business of school would distract me from grief. But when I actually had to teach, I struggled. As my sophomores waltzed in, cheery and chatty, I suddenly blanked on the lesson plan. What were we even doing? I started to talk. You probably heard that a teacher died over the weekend, and she was my colleague and friend for many years. We started teaching, and at that moment, I put a finger in the air, trying to pinch time, to keep the mask of self-control affixed to my face. Many seconds of silence passed. But on this day, there was only a noticeable deadening silence. If there was a sound, it was of the dust motes cascading slowly lower and lower. Oh, and my not very quiet sobs. My fingers ceased to waver and fell to the desk. To get through the moment, I think I showed a movie. And even today, I can't remember which one. When class ended, which I think happened without me noticing, no student said anything to me. And I didn't address it the following day, or the day after that, or ever. I wondered if that was a missed opportunity, a teachable moment about grief or vulnerability that I was too cowardly to discuss. Normally, I'm pretty buttoned up, but I felt rather undressed at that moment. I knew that Amy's death had a powerful impact on me, but I foolishly thought I could control it. It was difficult that Monday to be raw and exposed in front of 25 teenagers. And if I'm honest, at the time, I was embarrassed of my crying. I was afraid of looking unmanly and losing some authority. I was ashamed that they could openly witness me without some composure, like an actor without his costume on a stage. Part of me has always feared that students wouldn't connect with me if I was too much myself. But there's power in witnessing someone being unguardedly human. And even after that first year of teaching, which ended in tears, I understood that teaching is about relationships and connections, and courage, and vulnerability, and being seen. While strange and unsettling, and certainly not something I thought would be part of teaching, these emotional moments have taught me a lot about being a better teacher. I always knew that there was showmanship to teaching. Someone once commented that teachers put on 900 shows a year. But it took some time to accept how hard it is for me to keep up with the performance, how I can't always put away myself doing the job. Those tears have taught me that maybe I don't need so much show. They have taught me how to care about more than just the intellectual and the academic. Who would have thought that the most important action sometimes would be to share a simple, honest, human emotion publicly? And why not? Teaching is social and about real people trying to figure out what life is and can be. At times, I know I can take it all dangerously seriously, whether it's a grade on an essay or a quiz, a sentimental moment in a story, or saying goodbye. But for me, the only way the job matters is by making a positive impact on others, while they are alive and while you are. Thank you.
I have two quick tasks before closing up my section. Do you need to say anything at the end? Great, I'll do mine then. Great. One, can we thank the Brookline Education Foundation for making this possible? When I talk with friends who teach in other parts of the country and I explain the resources that are made available to us through organizations like the Brookline Education Foundation, they cannot believe the gifts that we have here. So thank you for helping us have careers that continue with these opportunities. It means the world to us. Second and final, this is one that always gets me choked up. When I was in grad school with Margaret, she talked a lot about a triangle that included content and teacher and student, and that we had to think about all parts of that triangle and the balance of all those things, that the content's important and the teacher's experience is important and the student is important, and that we have to keep our eye on all those things. And then in the last day of the class, she she revealed to us that in the center of the triangle is love. And I hope you, there it is. I hope you heard that tonight. So let us thank these brave educators who shared their stories with us. Thank you.
Well, I can't find my last page, but that's okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, John, for being such a wonderful leader. I just want to note that Amy was a Metzger Fellow, and that was a really lovely tribute. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. We couldn't do what we do without everyone's support. And if you are so inclined and feel like taking a look at the program and checking out the QR code or sharing that with your friends and colleagues and neighbors, we can't do what we do without donations. So just want to do that quick little plug because that's my job. Thank you all and have a lovely weekend.
You